I grew up poor.
Oh.
I grew up with 10 people living in a 3-bedroom trailer. We didn't have a lot of food to eat at times. We'd have to eat mayonnaise sandwiches, syrup sandwiches. All these parts and stuff, my uncles, we used to all look through this to try to sell and try to make money. We didn't have a lot of conveniences because we lived outside of the city limits. And I think that here is where my heart for community started. And it was just in the simple sense of all of us working together, growing together, living together, and doing all the work that was required. And I think that as I evolved to more financial sufficiency, I think that it was easier for me to look back and have a passion for other people who were in those same conditions to say, you know what, how can I be a part of building a better and stronger community around people, and maybe they can make the leap that I was able to make. We play football. I mean, it looks small now, but when you was a kid, it was big. It was on the sports field, on the football field itself, that the racial barriers were dropped, because I lived in the segregated South. You know, in high school, I was playing football, and I was heavily recruited. You know, I was one of the top recruits in the state of Texas. I could have went to any Division I college that I wanted to go to.
Damon Dunn at the 10.
And so I chose to go to Stanford University because I felt like it gave me the best opportunity to be successful. Even if football didn't work out, it was the best choice, you know, that I've ever made in my life. And I was surrounded by kids that wanted to be senators and Supreme Court justices and president of the United States, and it caused my ambition to grow. And that was one of the single most important lessons I learned at Stanford. Whatever it is that you can conceive, if you're willing to work hard enough, you can achieve it.
Looking at him, it kind of sets the expectation, or it breaks through a lot of the stereotypes that, you know, African American or Hispanic students are not able to go on to college, and he was able to break that.
When he rolled out of the NFL and he was ready to start his business career, his idea of starting was not going to work for somebody else. It was starting his own company, and they started basically from scratch.
When I was 12 years old, I was a class clown. And one day my teacher had enough of it, and she put me out of the classroom. And I remember sitting in the hallway, and a janitor walked by, and he told me, he said, look into that classroom. I looked in there, and he said, well, what do you see? And I didn't say anything because I was embarrassed. And he said, what I see in there are a bunch of kids learning how to be your boss. And that hit me so deep to my core. At that point, I started to start setting higher expectations for myself. I said, I'm never going to get kicked out of the classroom again. I said, I'm going to start making good grades because I'm not going to let anybody else be my boss.
They went out and did it, and they did it across several states in a big way with major corporations, and built up a successful empire that it'd be impressive for anybody in their entire life to have a career that successful, and to do it at his age in that amount of time frame is almost unheard of in the industry that we're in.
Today I want to talk to you about finishing the race.
Damon's first sermon was finish the race, and it really goes with him, because anything Damon starts, he's gonna finish.
Anyone who would take the time, coming from California, to come and inspire kids, to me, that's amazing.
He's always been taught to give. The more you give, the more you receive. And so Damon's always been a giver, and that's one of the qualities that I admire in him, because he blesses others. And we often talk about you can feed a man for a day, but if you teach him how to fish, you feed him for life. And so that is a quality that he instills in everyone around him.
If one person is suffering in my community, if one person is dealing with an injustice in my community, if one person is dealing with education challenges, then that diminishes me. And I am inextricably woven together with their sense of purpose and their destiny. And so I feel compelled, I feel obligated to go help and to go share. Thank you, thank you. I did have a little swag in that walk, didn't I? I like that swag at the end. Is this too loud? How did a kid like me end up being a Dunkin' Donut operator owning 38 stores? Shout out to all my Dunkin' people that are here. And the story starts like this. I heard a story once about an eagle that lost an egg. And this egg was found by a chicken. And this group of chickens started to nurture this egg until one day a baby eagle hatched out of that egg. But because it was born in a chicken pen, it began to play chicken games. It began to entertain chicken dreams. Its greatest ambition was to sit up on the chicken post and to yell cockle-doodle-doo. But then one day an adult eagle saw that baby eagle down there with all those chickens. And he flew down and swooped by that eagle and said, "You're not a chicken, you're an eagle." And the baby eagle saw that adult eagle flying with such grace and such majesty. And for the first time, something started to swell up on the inside of that baby eagle. Started to look beyond the chicken post. Started to look beyond the chicken pen. Eventually began to flap his wings and fly. So my story begins with a lot of great eagles that have come into my life to have taught me what it means to be an eagle and what it means to fly. I'm going to start my story to the Duncan story, but there's a lot between growing up in that trailer where my mom had me at 16 and left me with my grandparents. There's a lot that happened. I lost 3 of my closest friends to murder in high school. My father was killed when I was 3, so I didn't grow up with a dad. So on Father's Day, I don't get that wonderful experience a lot of people get. So I'm going to start the story here. Brad Freeman, Ron Spogli, they own a really large private equity company called Freeman Spogli. Many of you know them because they exclusively buy retail companies and distribution companies. They've owned household name companies like PetSmart, and they own Florida Core, and they've owned CB Richard Ellis, and on and on and on. They've bought a lot of these great companies. And these 2 guys were eagles that came into my life and said, "Damon, I'm going to invest in you. We're going to go out there and buy you 4 Dunkin' Donut stores in Mobile, Alabama, and Biloxi, Mississippi, and we're going to create a little laboratory for you. I want you to go work in those stores for a year. We're going to put some good people around you, and then come back to us in a year and tell us the plan for how to grow this business in an accretive way." So I went into the laboratory. I'm working at these stores. I moved from Newport Beach, California to Mobile, Alabama. And I'm working in these stores 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. every night. I didn't know anybody. I had nothing else really to do. And I'm learning things that you can only learn by working inside the store. I'm learning that, okay, I'm working the sandwich station, and I realize, okay, wow, this is the only station that feeds both the drive-through and the front counter. So if we're going to have a bad speed of service, it's likely going to start at the sandwich station. Maybe I got to put 2 people on it. Maybe all my teams have to learn how to hot hold. Maybe we need a rotisserie belt to start doing all of our breads so we're not using one of the turbo chefs to make all the breads during peak time. You start learning lessons by actually being on the ground floor, lessons that you can't learn by being a CEO. I'd go to one store, and one store would have an $800 hour, and they'd have 7 people working. Another store would have an $800 hour, and they would have 4 people working. Why is that? I started to realize that was due to training. If you could read the video display unit and walk away and make all 4 drinks versus having to look at the drink aid over and over for every little item. Okay, it's going to be 3 shots of espresso to make this large, latte, half a cup of steamed milk. That impacted all the things that we're doing now, because now I buy tablets and laptops for every one of my stores. And every crew member that comes in, they spend 3 hours, and we pay them on the floor, in the lobby, watching Duncan University courses, and they go right from that drink aid course that they're watching online, right to working a 3-hour shift online, and we're paying them to do that. A lot of lessons that I learned by being inside that store. At the same time, I was meeting with investment bankers because Brad and Ron didn't sit me down and say, this is how you grow accretively. This is what an exit event should look like. This is how you should be building your capital structure. They just gave me an opportunity, and I had to go learn these things, but they gave me some good people to be around me. So I was meeting with investment bankers because I wanted to understand, how do you guys position these companies to sell, right? What does the growth profile need to look like? How is the underwriting met by people who are going to buy these stores? And so I started to learn. I met with over 300 investment bankers. I looked at 1,100 teasers, and I would send groups of 50 teasers to their chief investment officer inside their family office, and he would send me back a one-liner: too much CapEx, too much customer concentration. If they have more than 15% ownership, then you could, or 15% of your sales, and you can lose a lot of your sales if you lose one customer. So I was generally understanding different business models so that I could understand, how do we position this company to have value where someone would underwrite it and someone would want to grow this business and buy a growing business, because I knew I wanted to build a business that was going to be growing. And through all of that, certain things began to birth out of that process. And I have a unique skill set, because typically you don't learn about Freeman Spogli's proprietary process to grow companies and to professionalize P&Ls unless you're one of their portfolio companies, unless you're the CEO of Florida Core and on that management team, or unless you're the CEO of Sir La Table and you're on that management team. You learn what their proprietary process was. And good for me, good fortune is that they owned a company called AFC, which many of you will know. They used to own Popeye's Chicken in churches. And the former president of Popeyes was John Luther, who became the CEO of Dunkin', who had retired and with his son-in-law, Dan Bowers, became a franchisee of Dunkin'. And so I had the opportunity to go spend time with John and with Dan Bowers and really learn the four-wall economics. But let me tell you how we attack it, because I do believe that this is good for everybody. And a lot of guys that I talk to who are in this business don't understand how we professionalize a P&L. We'll take labor, for example, and we're going to break it down to its MECE. That's an acronym, M-E-C-E. All of the mutually exclusive parts that when added together are comprehensively exhaustive of the entire system that you're looking at. So we'll take labor and we'll break it down into 5 buckets. And we want to be able to track it and measure it. We want to be able to project it. We need to be able to scale labor up and down based upon transactions. And so we'll look at labor and we'll say, okay, we got crew labor. I'm inside the store timing people to figure out how many transactions we can get done. And doing that from store to store, and I came out with a formula of about 11 transactions per man hour. So if we have 77 transactions, I've got 7 people in my store. If we have 55 transactions, I've got 5 people in my store. Then we have minimums of 2 all day long, and then we have 4 to 5 during peak because we have a lot of different access points, mobile on the go, front counter, drive-through, DoorDash, and so you have to account for points of coverage during your peak times. And so we're looking at that crew labor, and now we're saying, okay, if we can look at this store the last 5 weeks, and we look at by hour, and we can look at the transactions by hour, and we can look at an average of those transactions by hour over 5 weeks, we can spit out the next week of what our labor projection should be. And then we look at last year to see if there's a comp up or comp down. And then we'll look if there's any seasonality that's coming, in summer times are coming, or whether the holidays, Christmas are coming. So that's crew labor. Then we go look at, we say, okay, yeah, GM labor, that's just fixed. But then we have KPIs, key performance indicators. That's bonus labor. So that's driven by how you perform as a GM. So that grows on its own and it has its own denominator. Then we have bake labor. For bakers, I'm in there timing people overnight. You know, how many dozen can a baker actually make? Because we're JBOD, unlike a lot of Dunkin' stores on the East Coast, which have CML, Central Manufacturing locations that deliver donuts. We bake our donuts overnight in the store. So I've got to know how many dozen can a baker make, per hour. I came out with a formula based on experience, 10 to 14 dozen an hour. So now I can scale my bake labor up, I can scale my bake labor down based upon transactions. And then you've got your turnover, right? So that's your training labor. We look at how do we not allow training labor to drive our P&L at the end of the year? How do we do that? We decide how much training labor we want. So we set about 6% of our total labor, and so we are able to start 1 person per week in each store unless there's a tremendous amount of turnover. That's how we're looking at that. And then you got your operating hours. And so I do all of that because now I'm in a position to where I create a dashboard, and I know exactly how many labor dollars we're allocating per store per week. And we give the schedules from central location. I make all the schedules for all of my stores. The GMs just have to say, bring 5 people in, send 2 people home, send 1 person home. So we do that so that we have consistent control over our labor. And then I have a dashboard that says this week you are allocated $3,100 and you're at $3,150. You owe me $50 back in the next week. And so we project it. We're able to scale it. We're able to measure it. We're able to look at it on a weekly dashboard. And then every single Monday, I call my GMs and I know exactly where you are in your labor. And we do the same thing for food costs. We strip it down to its lowest common denominators and we measure it just like we do with all of our labor costs. Those things matter, particularly in times of inflation where every margin is being pierced and every margin is being pushed. And so we do a really good job of professionalizing our P&L. That's something that you get working with private equity guys. Another eagle I met, I was a freshman at Stanford University. I'll never forget this. We had played Arizona State in a football game, and I scored a 100-yard touchdown. That's not important to the story, but just wanted y'all to know I was a baller. And so we came home. It was a night game, played at 7 o'clock, night game. We get back to campus, and on campus, it was raining. So the buses bring us back to the facility. Training room, we're getting ready to go out to the parties because we're going to go see girls tonight because this is exciting. I scored a touchdown. And it's midnight. And it's raining. And to get to the fraternity houses, you have to drive by the backside of campus. And when you drive by the backside of campus, you go by the driving range. And at midnight, in the rain, there was one dude out there hitting golf balls at midnight in the rain by himself. We come home 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and this dude is still out there at 3 o'clock in the morning with one light on, hitting golf balls over and over and over again. And I saw him in the training room the next day. We were freshmen. And I was like, Tiger, what were you doing hitting golf balls at 3 o'clock in the morning in the rain by yourself? And with a straight face, he said, it don't rain that much. So whenever it rains, I got to work on my rain game. And this is an 18-year-old kid. There's no Masters champion. There's no PGA events. There's no Nike. There's no Buick. There's no billionaire. There's no yachts. There's just this kid. And I realized that there's levels to this hard work thing. All of us doing 40, 50 hours a week doing problem sets and trying to do all the football work that we have to do and all the training and all the lifting and all the running and all the games and all the practices and going back and doing 40 to 50 hours in problem sets. And then there was this guy by himself. And in every single successful person, whether you're in franchising or whether it's at Stanford or whether it's at Harvard Business School, every person I've been around in the NFL, you can look at NBA teams, there is a common thread of this hard work, this preference for hard work, to want it the hard way. Anybody can show up early once. Anybody can stay late once. But can you do it over and 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 over until it's no longer extra work? That's your normal level of productivity. Can you maintain a high level of intensity over an extended period of time? And that's what allowed a young kid like myself at my size to play in the NFL. That's what allowed me to go to Stanford University to be an A student. That's what allows me to work with private equity guys and exceed their expectations, for them to put $18 million behind me, to pay them back all $18 million, to give them $5 million back on top of it, to have $0 invested of equity in the business, to have a $25 million line of credit that's non-recourse in our business. That is what's required to achieve those outcomes. So I stand here today in a room full of people. Thank you. I stand here today in a room full of people. And I know that every room I go into, there's always somebody underperforming. The position you have, the vision was bigger than what you see right now. You're living beneath your potential. There's more you can do. There's another mountain that you can climb. There's another business that you can start. There's another store that you can open. And I came by today as another eagle to encourage those people that sit in this room today that know that you may not be meeting your potential to meet your potential. And I'm going to leave you with some good news and some bad news about the life you've always wanted. And by the way, I'm credible on this because I was the kid that was eating the mayonnaise sandwiches. I didn't read about this in a book. I didn't watch a documentary on YouTube before I got here. I was a kid that lost 3 friends to murder. I was a kid that grew up without a father. And I'm the kid that's standing on this stage. So I'm going to leave you with some good news and some bad news about the life you've always wanted. Down to every single person. The good news about the life you've always wanted is that it's waiting on you. The bad news about the life you've always wanted is that it's waiting on you. Thank you.